Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 20 of the Capitalist Corner. I am your host, Mark Pellegrino, and the chairman of the American Capitalist Party, along with my esteemed co host, and yes, co chairman, that's right, I'm going to say it because I think it's true, of the American Capitalist Party, Michael Liebowitz. How you doing today, Michael?
I'm actually doing pretty well. I'm running around like a chicken with its head cut off, but other than that, I'm okay.
Well, that sounds good. That describes my daily life. I consider that to be a productive day when you're running around like a chicken with your head off. Of course, I'm assuming a lot, but that's okay. So today, guys, we're going to be dealing a lot with Trump's war on the press and how disturbing and chilling I think this is. But I'm going to start it off with a war on me. Yes, on me first off by a fake news organization, I think, run by the ACP, the other ACP, otherwise known as the American Communist Party. And it's a site called Shattering Hegemony. And I'm pretty sure that the articles and headlines are written by either Hazaldine Hinkle or perhaps our friend, our commie friend Noah. And recently they posted. Now, this is not, by the way, a parody account. So if you go on their profile page, the way they post these headlines, this should say parody for a full disclaimer, because their news is sort of like The Onion, except it's commie related and attempting to push the commie agenda and or smear people who are the opposition to the communists. And this one just recently picked up a story that's been going around, perpetrated by a psychopath on social media, whom I offended by denying a cameo to. And so this person has faked suicide on multiple occasions and is either a sock account claiming to know the girl who has now committed suicide, or is teamed up with another psychopath to claim that this person I denied the cameo to has committed suicide because of me. So, Shattering Hegemony has picked up this, and they always do it after I comment on a Hinkle post. So, since I commented on the Hinkle post, or it was a Hazal Din post, they came out with Shattering Hegemony, which hasn't had much. It hasn't gotten much play, but it might get it after this. So in a way, I'm giving them unwanted publicity. But Shattering Hegemony says, breaking. The internet is in turmoil after rumors have surfaced indicating Mark Pellegrino's involvement in the alleged suicide of his most devoted fan after the television actor left her abusive comments. Now, I never left abusive comments. I simply refused to cameo. And the comments that were publicly noted on social media were, "Stop harassing my friends and fans," which was what this person was doing. I said, "Stop harassing them, or I will mute you and or block you." And though that is what constitutes my abusive messages. So the person who is either the girl in question or her friend has devoted a site called the Anti Pellegrino site. It's been taken down multiple times because my friends and fans have reported it multiple times, but it keeps resurfacing, and then trying to defame me, basically. Now, you said something that I thought was right on, Michael. I should sue this person. However, the problem with suing either Shattering Hegemony is not only the language that they use in the headline makes it extremely difficult to prove that it's a libel, but California has anti-slap laws, so that if I bring a libel suit against either Shattering Hegemony and or this individual in whatever country or state they live in, I think one of the people claims to be living in the Midwest, um, I get a slap suit instantly against me, where all of my social media and text become grist for the mill. And if I cannot prove that this person is deliberately lying to libel me or destroy my reputation, which there's an extremely high threshold of proof, I am then obligated to pay all of their legal fees, including mine, and penalties. So we're talking about spending $300,000 to $400,000 minimum in order to defend my reputation from these people. And then there is no guarantee under libel laws as they exist in the state of California that I can win. It's an extremely fraught and troublesome process. It's intended to promote free speech, but of course, it enables people like this to operate with impunity. I don't think libel is protected speech, but it's very difficult to prove that somebody's deliberately libeling you. Although in this case with this girl, she goes by the name of Faded Daystar on social media, and her compatriot is, who is either her or her compatriot is Madeline something or other. It might be an easier case to prove that they're deliberately trying to libel me, but it's still such a royal legal pain in the butt that I don't think I could pursue it.
So I believe I think you're right. I hadn't really given it a lot of thought before I sent that to you that you should sue him. But I believe that under New York Times versus Sullivan, you might be constituted as a public figure, which means that you then have to prove, I believe the standard is malicious intent. So,
well, I think the truth about Mark Pellegrino or the anti-Pellegrino website, it's literally the truth about Pellegrino, and then the handle is anti-Pellegrino. So it's clearly their intent is malicious in nature.
Okay, so I just checked this because a few weeks ago I got a direct message and it's been deleted. That's what I just looked for, from the Faded Daystar account, and it was from somebody claiming to be her husband that said she was in a coma. The doctors say she's not coming out. I don't know much about the woman. She was clearly unstable. I had told you in the past, like, you got to do something about this woman because she's jumping into our conversations with various people, and it was just out of hand. Clearly stalker-esque, for lack of a better term.
Considering she lived somewhere in Central or Eastern Europe and that she would jump in on our tweets at all times of the day or night, really disturbing.
Yes. So I don't know if it's even a real, I mean, obviously there's somebody that's running the account, and I've heard her voice. I don't know what her real name is, who she really is, what her agenda is. But the bottom line is, you've never abused this woman. I saw, because she was attacking fans of yours.
Right.
And what she would do is she would get upset with somebody and then tag you into the discussion,
right,
hoping that you would come to the rescue, as she, I think, saw herself as coming to your rescue. And you told her, you have to stop harassing my fans.
Yes.
You have to stop. So that was the gist of it. But we really don't know what has happened with this woman. But let me just say, in my view, even if you had sent some abusive message to her, that doesn't then make you culpable in anybody's suicide, even if she did, which we really don't know. We haven't seen a funeral or a death certificate or anything else. We have Nicole Hingle says that the husband has recently sent her a message that the woman is awake now. So yeah, I'm sure she'll be returning soon to the social media enterprise. But you're right about the lawsuit. To be honest, I jumped the gun. I was irritated when I saw it, and I just immediately sent it out to you and said, you should sue these fuckers. But you're right. It is a high bar, and I believe it should be a high bar to sue somebody.
I agree. Now, look, the only reason I know this stuff is because I went to a libel attorney a while back, because around 2013, I was being attacked by a group of people in the SPN fandom who were alleging that I was a racist, a homophobe, a transphobe. They were alleging all kinds of nonsense. And it wasn't just that they were alleging it, they were passing it on to other fandom. And so it was becoming viral within the fandom. And then acting on this fake news were attempting to get me fired from jobs. Like, literally, if you go to any promoter who's announcing me for a show, for a convention, you will inevitably find the first 20 tweets on that site to be totally negative. I don't feel safe around him. He's a racist. All of that comes from the false information that's been passed around me on the internet that people just don't do their due diligence on or check. So these people not only influence people who then get on these sites that influence whether or not the promoters want to deal with this kind of nonsense. But they call promoters directly, they email them directly, and they talk to network folks, and they say, "Do you really want this guy? Did you know he's a homophobe?" Even though I've never said anything to make them suggest that, my own son is gay. None of this matters to them. None of it. They don't care. They've gotten a bug up their behinds about stuff that I represent, namely liberty, capitalism, freedom, that they find repulsive, and they attack. And they don't stop attacking. And the nature of the internet is, once this thing is out there, it's out forever. And somebody picks it up as new news. A new entrant into the marketplace thinks, oh, this is new information. Even though it was said in 2017, they now refresh that thing in 2025 as if it's new and give it a whole new life. So it's like watching a zombie revive itself over and over again and eat people's brains. And so, when this was happening to me and they were trying to affect my employment, I went to a libel attorney and asked about what were my options in this case. And I really feel these people need to be punished and set up as an example to make other people on the internet fear, taking out of context information and passing it on so it goes viral. And when he told me the obstacles that I had to go through and the amount of money and investment and time that it would take, it just wasn't worth it to me.
On a much smaller scale, I was a regular guest on a very popular local talk show for about 5 years. And there were a lot of regular callers that were, I don't like to ascribe motive, but it was so obvious that I will. They were envious. They felt, why is this prisoner? He gets to come on, give his spots. Why don't I have a spot? That kind of thing. And while I was, in prison, one guy actually called the host and said, yeah, I'm going to call the court and tell them that they shouldn't let Liebowitz out. Now, obviously, it's not going to have any effect, but you're trying to have an effect. You're trying to fuck with my life. You're not just disagreeing with me or insulting me. You're trying to really screw me. And, little over a year, maybe a year and a half ago, Melissa, my girlfriend at the time before she passed away, I was taking care of her autistic son. That was the deal that she and I made. We moved in together so that she could work full time and I would take care of her son and continue to do the podcast stuff. And I called the show and it was a lighthearted moment. And I was talking about the frustrations and joys of taking care of a 4-year-old child. And I pointed out, when I do my podcast, for instance, and I said, I tell him, play in your room, don't come walking across the screen or whatever. And he would anyway. It didn't matter what I told him to do. He didn't listen. But I did tell him, play in your room. It's 45 minutes and, then we can do whatever. And this guy who listens to the show, contacted DCF. Put tweets out there saying that I was abusing this kid and I'm making him stay in his room. So, and it was like, dude, you're trying to ruin my family at this point, right? This goes beyond just commenting on what I'm saying on the air. You're trying to screw up my life. Now, luckily, the host of the show had my back. I've got former police officer friends that have my back. So I wasn't, too concerned that anything would come of it, but this guy's intention was to really screw up my life.
Yeah.
And within weeks of that, I found out Melissa had cancer and everything, my whole life was flipped upside down and I just wasn't paying attention to any longer. But the people that do that sort of thing, these are vile human beings.
I have to point to Rand's definition of envy, which I think is really true. And I think that you're right. These people are motivated by envy. And this kind of, we live in a culture that's becoming increasingly motivated by envy, which is why I think statism is so much more powerful today in our culture than it was way back when. Now Rand talked about the distinction between jealousy and envy. I mean, jealousy is wanting something that someone else has. Now, there's still a value orientation to that. There's still a pro-life orientation to that. Envy is hating the good for being good. And there's no there's no positive conclusion to that. There's no value pursuit in that. There's only the destruction of value in the envious person. What you have, they want you dead. And this is precisely what these folks in that toxic part of the fandom want from me. They're not trying to create a value. They're nihilists in the end, and they're trying to destroy what they consider a value, me, for envy. And they resent everything that I represent. And they resent that I'm not sympathetic to their victimhood, because many of them claim to be victims. And they've taken the intersectionality movement to claim some kind of moral stature based on their victimhood. And they try to use that in order to leverage power over me. And because I don't fall for it, it makes them angry. And then that anger, of course, is stoked into rage and then becomes a sort of social contagion on social media. But enough about me. As much as
I want to add one thing to this, because there's an interesting dynamic, Mark, that has taken place in regards to me, in that a lot of people will bring up the fact that I was a convicted felon, I have a violent history, prison, blah blah blah, I haven't changed. But not always, but I picked up on it early that with such people, there's a hidden assumption that they don't express, is while they're saying that I haven't changed, they're literally taking for granted that I have, right? Because I'll tell you what, if I was 21 years old and someone said that type of stuff to me, it would be an entirely different experience. Let me just say that I wouldn't be talking about it on a podcast, right? And they know that, because when I was like that, people did not talk to me that way. Right. They didn't talk to me like they do now. And I kind of take that as a compliment. I mean, they're cowards, right? But at the same time, it's a compliment because they're recognizing the very thing that they're denying. And that's the fact that I'm not that person any longer.
Indeed. And I have to say something else, Michael. You represent something that lots of folks who categorize themselves as victims despise.
Yes.
You represent a self-made man. You show that you're not determined by your circumstances, by the way you grew up, by your economic station. All of the things that people claim shackle the human spirit and enslave you to one way of doing things, and to never breaking that glass ceiling that society has put up for you. You are a refutation of that. In the flesh, you're a concretization of the value of philosophy, the right philosophy, and guiding one's life out of the morass, out of hell. And that makes them upset, because they have to compare themselves now to you, and their learned helplessness now to your learned hopefulness, to your learned capacity for individuation, and your capacity to self-start, self-generate, to move ahead, to become better and improve themselves. And that's what motivates them.
Mark, this is such a fascinating topic. I know we have things to get to, but there's so much I think that we can cover on this first. There's this idea in the minds of the envious and the jealous. They will look at your success and they say, why should this guy be successful and not me? They don't understand the years of hard work, of mastering your craft, of learning how to act, of going on auditions, getting turned down, going to another audition, finally catching, some kind of break, and then having to rinse and repeat, and the amount of heartbreak, dedication that takes. And it was similar when I think of myself. These people just thought that I just dropped out of the sky onto the radio show. Right. They didn't understand the decades of dedication to improving myself and to learning so that I could come on that show and talk intelligently. They acted as if it just was handed to me out of nowhere. And it's such I don't even know if it's concrete bound mentality, because they're not even taking into consideration all the concretes. It's just this one concrete that they're looking at, and then they build a massive assumptions into it. And it's just absolutely ridiculous that people do that. And it's something that, I don't know if you ever read the book called Envy, A Theory of Social Behavior. I think it's by, I want to say Helmut Schauck is the guy's name that wrote it. But a very good book. And he talks about Schadenfreude and envy being not the desire to get what somebody else has, but envy is the desire to destroy what somebody else has. And I agree. And I agree with Rand, of course. The Age of Envy is an awesome essay that many people are motivated by that. But that's all I now have to say. So if you want to get to the news, we can. Of course, if you want to add something to this, you are welcome to.
Well, I wanted to just acknowledge something that Aaron says here. I think Ayn Rand is the best psychologist. She even barely touched the field, but her insights far exceed anyone. I have to agree. She was very good. I mean, we have to avoid psychologizing if we can with respect to people, but she had people's psychological profiles sorted pretty well, and her philosophy enabled her to see much, much, much further than most of us can, which is why so many of the things that she projected in her novels are coming true as we speak. And speaking of her novels, Atlas Shrugged, the Fountainhead, I think we have a near perfect example of a Rand villain in the White House at the moment. And there's my segue into what the DOJ is deciding to do with respect to journalists' records. Now, the headline in the Epoch Times of all places. Now, the Epoch Times is a conservative newspaper, basically, run by Chinese dissidents. But I think they do have a fairly good standard of reporting true stuff, irrespective of which way it goes. Now, I didn't catch any media bias in this. Maybe you did.
No, I didn't.
No, it's reported the straight facts, and the straight facts are chilling, folks. I mean, let me just read the title. DOJ rescinds Biden-era limits on seizing journalists' records in criminal leak probes. Now, what particularly disturbed me about the language of Pam Bondi, who's the Attorney General of the United States of America, is the vagueness with which she makes claims with respect to leaks that endanger national security, but it goes further than that, or the process of our operations of government, or something along those lines. So that is a wide swath of potential areas there that gives the Department of Justice a wide degree of latitude with respect to how it judges the news. Now, irrespective of whether the Biden administration had these protections in there to protect journalists, from Trump or doing bad reporting, none of that is relevant. What's relevant is that journalists should be protected to make the news. Their sources should be protected. Otherwise, the sources will not come out and you will not get the news, because the Department of Justice could decide that a leak that, along the lines of, well, the government is actually listening to every word you say, which is relevant to us as a people. It's not that they're not getting warrants. They're warrantlessly wiretapping everything you say. This is valid news for the public to get. And this could now become a national security issue or something that threatens the operations of government. And Pam Bondi could legally now come down on you as a journalist to get your sources and possibly arrest you for broaching this news. Now, this is frightening to me. What do you say?
It's frightening to me as well. A lot of the things that this administration is doing frightens me. I was critical of Trump before he ever took office in 2016. I was critical of him, virtually the whole time he was in office, and I wouldn't support him this time around. But I have to admit that even I'm surprised at the degree to which they are implementing their agenda, that they're not worrying about things like the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, due process. And what's happened ultimately is they've really set up a difficult situation to argue against, because they're so in their cocoon of information, of what they'll listen to. So they just respond, oh no, they're deporting criminals. Okay, well, I can cite so many things that say they're not only deporting criminals, but then you're just going to tell me, no, those aren't good sources. The only good source says that all they're deporting is criminals. And it's a very scary situation, because they've really, really mastered this element of convincing their followers that a certain thing is true, and then that enables them to act in a certain way. And although they'll get pushback, they've got a floor beneath which that pushback can't go. Like right now, his approval rating is like 39% or something along those lines. But those 39% aren't going anywhere, no matter what. So that creates a lot of protection for a guy like Trump. And the chilling effect that this particular policy can have, especially when what he's ultimately talking about are reporters reporting things about him, right? It's not like it's not concerning anything else in the world. It's just he doesn't like the press because they're hard on him. And sure, there's been media that's been unfair to him. But the flip side of that is, when he was running for president in 2015, he got all the media time he wanted. He sucked the oxygen out of every room he was in and was able to get all the attention he wanted because of who he was. And you can't have it both ways, right? He loved it then, but then he doesn't like it when it goes against him. And I'll criticize the media too, but you cannot have a situation where sources are that were not the, if you want to find the sources, find them, but to compel the media to turn who it is over, that's insanity to me. And then he's also got these lawsuits against the media. So it's not just this one thing. It's an all-out attack on the press.
Yeah, so what we get out of this administration is them talking out of both sides of their mouth and wanting to have their cake and eat it too. On the one hand, with the tariffs, he wants to bring manufacturing back to America, which implies that the tariffs are going to be permanently in place to incentivize businesses back into America. I think that's a terrible idea, of course. On the other hand, he's using it simply as leverage to get people to lower their tariffs so there's a more fair and level trading ground. Well, that's an entirely different thing, and the two things cannot coexist at the same time. It's either one or the other, and he's sent messages that they are both simultaneously. This is a guy who's not afraid to pretend contradictions can exist in the same place. And here's a perfect example of it in the article, with Pam Bondi going on to say, the memo indicates that under the new policy, subpoenas, court orders, search warrants targeting journalists must still meet strict procedural safeguards. Okay, first let's stop there for a second. Now, let's remember that for the past month or so, since the left has been bringing up procedure and a specific procedure of due process, the right has been poo-pooing it as you're just stopping us on procedural grounds. In other words, procedure is a term that is not ironclad. It's something that it's a flexible term. It's plastic. We can move it around with respect to our own particular whims and wants. That's not what procedure is about. Procedure is precisely to disengage emotions from the process of justice and subordinate those to reason. That's why we have due process. And for an administration that is poo-pooing procedure to now say we will follow procedure, forgive me if I don't believe you. I'm sorry, I don't believe you, because if you've already shown us that procedure is what you think procedure is, it's not what the actual meaning of the term is. It goes on to say, so procedural safeguards, including high-level approval. What does that mean? What does high-level approval mean? Since they all seem to be yes men to Trump, it could go all the way to Trump. Trump's going to say, yeah, approve it, bust these guys.
Yeah.
But that kind of, does that sound like vetting to you?
No. Let me tell you something. I want to tell you an interesting thing that happened to me today. And let me say, I'm tired of talking about Trump, right? I would much rather be talking about other things. But what does a moral person do in the face of what's happening? What are you supposed to do? And they try to shut you up. Oh, it's TDS. Oh, that's all you talk about. You don't criticize anybody else, blah, blah, blah. All designed to shut people up, right? To just let him get away with it. And, yesterday somebody posted that if the media would tell the truth, Trump's approval rating would be through the roof. And I responded and I said, no, I said, if people were rational and honest, his approval rating would be in the basement. And I was immediately criticized. You shouldn't be criticizing those people. You should be trying to win them over. And you need to understand it. And I'm going to tell you something funny, Mark. And then I have to get to my other story I was going to tell. But I can't tell you the amount of times I've been told I have to understand the people that support Trump and why they support him. I've never in my life, not once, not one time, been told that I need to understand the people that support Barack Obama. Never. Never. It's always, I just have to understand and make allowances for the irrational, for the people that support this guy no matter what. And I'm not talking about people that voted for him. Look, you had bad choices. I'm not going to blame anybody for voting the lesser of two evil.
Hey, remind me to play devil's advocate to this particular point. So continue.
I will. So what are we supposed to do in this case? Not talk about Trump, not criticize his followers that make it happen despite their blatant irrationality and dishonesty? I just don't see that as an option for myself, and I'm willing to take the consequences for it. If I don't get followers, then I don't get followers. Whatever. I'm not going to lie to people. I'm not going to lie to myself. So this morning, I'm reading Trump's book, The Art of the Deal. And he's talking about the approaching purchase. It was a Hilton hotel, and it was to become the Trump Castle, right? And he talks about how he got $320 million in loans. And he talks about how he showed up and he got that, he got those loans. And he said, this illustrates the importance of credibility. When you have credibility, the people will loan you this money. He defaulted on those loans, right? Now, at the time he wrote the book, he hadn't defaulted on the loans yet, but he ultimately defaulted on those very loans. He tried to have his father bail him out with an illegal $4 million loan, but then that was ruled you can't do that. So it's just so funny to me that he's talking about credibility in a situation where the evidence turned out he was not credible. But yet his followers will tell me he's a great businessman. He's an objectivist hero. He could be an Atlas Shrugged. Why are you hating this successful billionaire? You should be honoring successful billionaires. I will always honor and respect and admire the successful people who earned it through their own hard work and through their character. Donald Trump is not that. He wasn't that as a businessman. He's not that as a president.
I would say he could be an Atlas Shrugged, but he wouldn't be Hank Reardon. He'd be
Orrin Boyle.
He'd be Aaron Boyle or James Taggart. I mean, to me,
Yes.
that's the kind of guy that we're looking at here. But look, I wanted to play devil's advocate to you because it is amazing to me that the Trump derangement syndrome goes to the right as well, and they can't see him obviously lying all the time. So he has zero credibility or saying contradictory things all the time. But here's what I think. And I think I've said this before because I'm sure we've had this discussion before. As much as my friends on the right who have Trump derangement syndrome annoy the fuck out of me because they are immune to reason and they drive me absolutely insane. Their intransigence comes from a sense of resentment, an enduring sense of resentment that they have been marginalized by the culture for a long time. Now, this has been brewing in the academia for 50 years or so, but it's over the last 10 years especially it bore fruit in social media and in our popular culture, and it affects our language, it affects our entertainment. It's everywhere. They've been villainized. Now, it was expressed outright by Hillary Clinton, the deplorables comment, and
Barack Obama too, with clinging to their guns and their Bibles.
Their guns and their Bibles, and it's clear that the left condescends to and looks down on the right. They also condescend to and look down on the people they give political patronage to. Just so you know, it's plantation politics. If you are like the Democratic Party, they don't like you. They use you, of course, for political leverage and power, but they're not your friends. They look down on you. They think you're determined by your circumstances and incapable of dealing with life on your own. You need their help. So it's an across the board sort of leveling when it comes to the Democrats, but the people on the right have felt this sting for a couple of decades, and for the first time in forever, somebody from the right stood up and gave back as good as they were getting. Usually the right cowers. Usually the right tries to take the high road, and the people the people in general feel undefended. They didn't have a standard bearer to defend their perspective. They were the forgotten man, as Amity Schle's title of her great book was. They were the forgotten people, and they now feel visible and have a voice. Unfortunately, that voice has been contorted by rage. It's been contorted by resentment, and it's hardened by those same things. And that's why they're resistant to give up their hero who fights for them. However pathological he does it, to them, he's an ally. Now, I don't like that. I think it's terrible. I think it's a terrible reason for a relationship. I think it's a codependent, sick thing. But I think that's their motivation for being who they are and for being as stubbornly resistant to change as they are. Now, does that make you feel? I already know the answer to this, but does that make you feel any more of a sense of understanding? I don't want to say compassion for.
I want to make sure that that's your best. Is that the best you can make of that case?
Okay.
Because I was told yesterday I need to steel man Trump, and
Okay.
I'm getting ready to. Because I am going to poke so many holes in that. Like,
No,
you may have to throw me out of the party after this.
This is just my theory, and this is just this is my feeling, trying to understand my buddy who will not move
Okay.
of what I tell him about.
All right.
Go ahead.
So this is where being a member of a political party becomes a problem. I don't know if it's a problem, because politicians bullshit. They cater, they triangulate. I will not do that. Right? I would rather be honest and speak my mind than kiss ass.
Yes.
Now, here's the problem I have with that. I can still remember when, black crime rates were skyrocketing and people were saying, well, look, they've suffered decades of discrimination, slavery before that. They're living in poverty in drug infested neighborhoods, gangs, and the whole nine. And the right would say, no, stop the victim, stop the victim mindset. You need to grow a backbone. You need to go out and get a job. To the kid who's, has no father in the house and his mother's a crack whore. And that wasn't an excuse for him in their minds. And I agree.
Yeah.
Right. When I was 21 years old, I sat in front of a judge. It was brought up that both my parents were heroin addicts. My father was my grandmother was an alcoholic. My father was an alcoholic. My father was abusive of my mother. Both of my parents, since before I could even formulate thoughts, taught me violence. When I was 6 years old, my mother started leaving me home alone. When I was 6 years old, kid in the neighborhood, another 6-year-old, choked me. I went home and I said, Mom, the kid choked me. She said, you go hit him with a beer bottle. The first shooting I ever saw took place at my house when I was 3. My mother covered me up to guide me up the stairs as shots were firing at my house, hit my father's friend in the leg. My father ran past us up the stairs to get his shotgun, ran back down the stairs with the shotgun, pinned the guy against the neighboring house with the shotgun in his mouth. And the only thing that stopped him from killing him was my mother. I've seen people break into my house and beat my father. I've seen people on crutches whom my father beat, right? I've gone through things. When I was 13, I backed down to a fight and my parents told me they were embarrassed, right? So now I went in front of a judge at 21 years old and he rightfully discounted all of that and sentenced me to 27 years consecutive with 6 for a total of 33 years. All these bleeding heart crying conservatives didn't line up to say, give this kid a chance. He deserves a break, right? None of them. Each one of them, I would bet my balls, would have said, look, this dude belongs in prison. Look what he did. I don't care what he went through. So the fact that they feel marginalized by the media or the universities, grow the fuck up. It's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic that as a grown adult, you look to this guy to be your hero. And if that makes him not like me, good, because I got to be honest, I don't want to be liked by people like that. I don't care. I don't care for your excuses. I don't care for your tears or how you're losing your jobs to Mexicans or the Chinese or anything else. I had to take responsibility for my life. I lost 25 years rather, because of my bad behavior. And I never complain about it. I never say I was railroaded. I never say any of that, right? So if I can do that, then grow up. And even if you're going to be that pathetic where you need a savior like that, none of that excuses the fact that you just look beyond this guy's obvious lies that he tells on a regular basis. You people are not his group. You are his marks. And I'm sorry, I really got wound up here. Like, because that aggravates me. Nothing aggravates me like that goddamn victimhood stuff. I really hate it.
I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely true. But I do think that's their justification.
Oh, I do too.
I have no sympathy for it as well. I have no sympathy for my friend who will not be moved. He just annoys me, and I think he's sort of stupid. I like him because we share other values in common, and I've known him for many, 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 many years before he became deranged. And so I have that. I have lots of shared experiences with him that keep me in the relationship, but. I like you do not feel sympathy for people who give in to victimhood. I do not feel sympathy for people who try to leverage victimhood for power. In fact, I feel contempt for those people, and I feel contempt for the people who actually try to use the sympathies and feelings of other people to progress their own lives and expand their own circle of power, which is exactly what Trump is attempting to do right now. And speaking of Trump suing other newspaper venues, it turns out that Trump is attempting to sue a newspaper, the Des Moines Register, which posted a poll, I guess, back in the election days that put Kamala Harris as a 3-point lead in Iowa. And of course, we all know now that he won Iowa by something like 13 points. And so now this is the level of guy he is. The fact that it irks him that this newspaper published a poll that had Kamala Harris ahead in a state that he ended up winning by 13 points. And that now as president of the United States, he wants to go back and revisit that and correct them by lawfare. The very thing he says, was used against him to persecute him and bankrupt him and throw him in jail and prevent him from becoming president of the United States again, is the very same tool he's trying to use against the Register right now by conflating defamation with consumer law. And the case is actually quite absurd. But Michael, if you want to get into a little bit of can you get into a little bit of the minutia, because the article itself is quite sophisticated in backing up.
I'll give you the basics of it. During the election, the what the hell's her name now? I can't even remember her name. The lady that does that, Ann Seltzer. She's a famous pollster from Iowa, and she has Kamala up 13 points. Virtually every commentator that I heard thought that that's crazy, that couldn't possibly be accurate. But nevertheless, that's what she said. Now, what incentive? The idea that she's going to throw her reputation away to say that Trump's way behind, to discourage voters or some convoluted thing. I don't know, whatever. And ultimately, who knows what motivates people anyway. But it doesn't make sense. And so what? They had her up 13 points. Trump won the state, so he didn't suffer any harm from it. Now, in a tort lawsuit, there's 4 elements, right? You have to have duty, breach, cause, and harm, right? So you'd have to show that they had a duty to Trump, which I don't know what duty that they could have to him other than to not defame him, right? A breach of the duty, I don't know how they breached it by coming to a different. There's no evidence that I've seen or heard that this was deliberate or that they manufactured it, right? But then you have to show that it caused harm. What harm did he suffer? None, nothing. And there's other things within this case that I'm trying to bring to my mind now, in relation to whether it's a commercial enterprise or they're using fraud to sell products, which they clearly weren't. That's not part of what's going on. It's just BS, and it's just Trump being Trump. We've heard, he didn't go after anybody during his first term, but we know it's because people wouldn't let him. But he got rid of all those guide rails. They're gone. They're intentionally gone. And now they're trying to further make it gone by the other story you talked about, where they're going to force reporters to turn over their sources. They're completely trying to insulate this guy from any type of consequences and insulate us from knowing what is going on.
Yeah,
And
this is
it's scary and it's dangerous.
and this isn't the only newspaper that he's going after as well, and slapping lawsuits on. So think about this, guys. The president of the United States, the most powerful person in the land, has lawsuits against newspapers that he doesn't like. In fact, at the end of the article, it says, here's a quote from Trump. Okay, now I want you to take this quote in, folks, and keep in mind that he is the chief executor of the laws of the land and the most powerful person on the planet who can use the power of government, is attempting to use the power of government in service of his own whims. Here's what he says. This is a quote. Now, it's a quote from Reason Magazine, so I'm going to put it on them, but they claim that Trump said, "We have to straighten out the press," Trump says, explaining his motivation for suing CBS and the Register. "I have to do it. Our press is very corrupt." Now, that's a very convenient, all-encompassing term, and when it comes from a government official, it could mean anything from they are in fact corrupt and printing fake news to they're printing and saying the news that the government and the establishment prefers them not to say. And I think it's the latter with respect to Trump. He wants a complicit news corps behind him, praising him, like Fox News is essentially doing now.
And Tim Pool and Tucker Carlson, and right, that's what he wants.
All the nationalists, pundits there that are getting more and more and more and more views and spreading more and more and more and more insanity. He wants the press to be that way. Now, the fact that he's taking action on it, that the Department of Justice is changing law to the effect that they can now subpoena journalists and actually call their sources out, the fact that Trump has this ideal in his head that the press needs to be straightened out because they're corrupt, in other words, not following his prescriptions, this is very scary. This is very scary. And by the way, remind me, because this is going to go into my capitalist thought of the day, because I think I owe one more.
You do. You're definitely in arrears here on the capitalist thought of the day.
I'm in arrears by one, and I'm backing out.
All right. So Ian Gilmore says something interesting. He said some of those are settling with him. Facebook and Meta settled, or Facebook/Meta rather settled. CBS/60 Minutes might settle. And this to me harkens back to what you were talking about earlier when you're in suing people for libel, is it's going to end up costing. So organizations will settle just to avoid having to disclose work product or not work product, but just to have to disclose maybe sources or have to pay exorbitant amounts, or, they don't want to do that. So they'll settle. I personally think that's a mistake, but it's not my money and not my secrets that are on the line. So it's rather easy for me to say so. So, Mark, there's also in the pile, we're running out of time here, so I wanted to get to it. This story about the fake gun. Did you see that one?
Oh, God.
Oh, God, you devil.
I just had a Mark Pellegrino moment when it should have been a Lucifer moment. Oh, Dad. Yes, I did. I did see that. You could talk about this because this is absolute madness. If you didn't think the world was crazy, check out this story. Go ahead.
I don't remember where this took place in. Something's telling me, I don't know why I have Iowa. Maybe it's just because of the last story.
I think I can find that.
So there was some kind of a contest where kids or an art project where they had to make art.
Missouri.
Okay, so they had to make art out of tin cans, or they were making art out of tin cans. And this kid,
internet thing. So when you say art project, it was an internet thing, not related.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thanks for refreshing my memory. Yes, it had nothing to do with school. This is outside of school. It's a thing where kids are making art projects and posting them to the internet. So this kid makes an AR-15 out of cans, and he gives the description. It was an AK-47?
Yes.
Well, Jesus, I just got everything wrong. I'm thinking AR-15. AR-15 is the one they usually go after. Okay, and it makes an AK-47. He gives a description of the AK-47.
He says this. He says, "This is the famous AK-47, with over 50 million manufactured in 10 countries. The AK-47 is the most popular assault rifle in the world."
Yes. So this kid, first his mother gets a call that says, your son's got to be searched when he comes into school because other kids are scared now. Then he gets suspended for 3 days under some anti-bullying thing or some nonsense. The kid made a fake gun for art that it had nothing to do with school. And the rules there say that this conduct has to be school related. This had nothing to do with school, and yet he's suspended. I mean, how much can people lose their minds? This is just the dumbest.
The superintendent even found that there was no evidence that the kid intended violence towards the school or intended violence, period. He has no history of bullying or cyberbullying in his life, in his entire life. I mean, he's only 14 years old, but still, I know a lot of kids by the time they're 14 have already told people to kill themselves online, and he's not one of them. He's apparently a decent kid. And they nevertheless suspended him for 3 days. And worse, on his permanent school record, it has him listed now as a cyber bully, which could affect his life going forward. It could affect his secondary schooling and college. Lord knows these kinds of things can wind up on the internet and could affect his employment. I think his parents are right to sue the school for what they've done. It's hyperbole in the worst possible way. And it's sort of evil because it distracts from the real pathologies that are going on in these schools that really need to be attended to. But I do want to mention a pet peeve of mine.
Okay, go ahead. I'm all for the sharing of pet peeves. We can make that a special feature of the show.
Pet peeve. Pet
peeves from Pellegrino.
Pet peeves from Pellegrino.
Or no, Pellegrino's pet peeves. The alliteration is perfect.
Yes, Pellegrino's pet peeves. Now say that 50 times fast. I don't think 14-year-olds should be on the frickin' internet. I think they should use the computers for school, and when they go home, bam, they don't have any more technology. I think they need to get back out riding bikes, playing volleyball, playing football in the streets. All this stuff that we used to do as kids that actually made us healthy, promoted mind-body connections that they are losing, promoted healthy testosterone and estrogen levels in us that we are now losing. I think, and here's why I say this. I know you're laughing at me, but bear with me. Here's why I say this. The worst people I have ever come into contact with on social media engages, the most despicable, bloodthirsty hordes that I have ever confronted are teenagers. People under 18 have no concept of the consequences of their actions, or at least they seem to have no concept of the consequences of their actions. And they pile on to people. This is why so many kids are filled with anxiety and depression. So many of these kids are on screens 24/7. They never get a break. I think it's psychologically damaging. I think it damages the neurons in their brains. I think it makes them socially oriented in a very perverse way, and it makes them second-handed. It does so many perverse incentives to their personalities. I think we're developing a generation of very fragile people as a result of this. Now, if I were the parent, I mean, the parent shouldn't have their kid on social media at 14. I'm sorry, it shouldn't be in Snapchat at 14. When you're old enough to take care of yourself at 18, go ahead and get on. This is my personal opinion. I have absolutely no control over what parents do, and I would never make a law request. What are you going to do? Hold on, before you attack. I would never make a law respecting this. I would never push my own preferences on other people, but I will look down on you.
Okay. Well, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today on Being a Boomer with Mark Pellegrino. He did walk to school uphill both ways.
I did walk to school uphill.
Well, here's the thing. So you said a lot of things. I don't know. I haven't seen studies. I did recently read something that said it's not as harmful, or it actually has benefits for kids to be on the internet, but I don't know exactly what it was. I know that's what people say. You know, I remember this quote from like 500 BC or so. And this guy, he says, you know, these days are terrible. The kids no longer listen to their parents. They're out of control. I mean, that's 2,500 years ago or so. I remember reading Betty Friedan, the Feminine Mystique. And she was talking about how the World War II generation, how they're all soft. They're you know they're soft. They're not tough anymore. This is just what people do, right? They say it was never like this before. I do it myself. I mean, I went the other day. We went to the baseball game, and there's all these scantily clad teenagers. And my friend saying, well, Jesus Christ, the girls didn't dress like this when we were young. And I'm thinking, no, they didn't, but they did. I mean, when I think, you know what I mean? It wasn't a big deal because I was a teenager. Now I'm an adult. So I like to be very careful about ideas like it's getting bad or it's getting worse. And what are the kids nowadays? I would have to see actual studies on it. I do think kids obviously should be getting exercise. That is an important thing.
We do know obesity is on the rise.
Obesity is a problem.
Diabetes is on the rise. The children are obese much more than they were 30 years ago. Their diets suck. And
that's all true. And I agree with that. And you know, I went
read and cipher at grade level. Come
Mark,
on.
I went through my old neighborhood, right? And I walked through. I was excited when I first got out and I walked around. And the thing that struck me where there was no kids, there was nobody playing, right? Yeah. Nobody was running around. We were kids. We were always playing. But here's another thing though, right? When I was 15, 16, we would all pile into a car, a bunch of deranged 16-year-olds, drunk and high, driving around looking for trouble. Kids don't do that nowadays to the same degree they did. So, you know, things change, some for the better, some for the worse. I would just have to see what the studies actually say. Is there any actual evidence for the feminization of boys or you know, that sort of thing?
There is apparently scientific evidence that shows testosterone levels are dropping in men and boys in the newer generations.
But does that mean it's because of the internet or is it because of diet? I mean, you'd have to show me what it's from.
I think it's
do we need RFK to step in with the diet stuff?
We don't. No. None of this can be solved by government regulation. It has to be solved by parents taking responsibility for the upbringing of their children and making sure that they are, you know, self-sufficient, and that means physically strong as well as mentally strong, and that requires a little guidance on their part and the capacity to say no when their kid wants to go online and really shouldn't be going online. Somebody said, Kiana, hide your phone. Kiana is older than 18, so she can do.
Hide it anyway. Your dad's a boomer. He's coming for the phone.
She knows I'm boomer adjacent.
So Kat Sterling says, well, my generation, she says, I mean, my generation was getting groomed left and right with unchecked internet access in the 2000s. Okay. I remember when I was a kid. Do you remember this? Don't talk to strangers. Right? It was always don't talk to strangers. Don't accept candy for strangers. When you go out trick-or-treating, you got to check the candy when you come home. I mean, so there was always this stuff going on. It's not new. There's new avenues by which it was taken. That doesn't mean that the new method or the new format is especially dangerous.
Let me just tell you real quick, just a quick confession, because I'm not saying that we were better as kids. I'm just saying that going out and being physical is a preferable way to build your mind-body connection than staying inside, sitting down, being sedentary, and watching a screen. I just think it's better for your mind. It creates better synapses. I'm not saying that when I would go over to my stepbrother's house on the weekend and he would steal his mom's car and then we'd drive into Hollywood when we were 16 and watch the Rocky Horror Picture Show and drive crazy.
The Rocky Horror Picture Show?
Yes. I've watched every Friday and Saturday night. My brother would steal his mom's car and we would go into Hollywood.
And that's what you did?
15 years old. Dude. You're going to get the wrath of lots of people on this post right there.
I got to tell you, when I think about rebellious teenagers, I'm not thinking about going and sneaking and watching the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Look, there was also alcohol and other things involved. Okay, it wasn't just that.
Were you drinking wine coolers, Mark? You and your buddy at the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Peach schnapps. Schnapps. No, okay, but I'm saying at least we were getting out there in the world. So no. I mean, it's my pet peeve is just my pet peeve. It's not something that I'm going to force on the rest of the world. Although I sort of did by doing it in this podcast.
It was made for a good talk, anyways. All right. Give us the capitalist thought of the day.
Oh, yes, I have the capitalist thought of the day. Look, folks, a free press is essential to liberty. A free press is our brain. It's our social brain. It's how we get information and how we're able to make choices and decisions, not only in everyday life, but with respect to the political class. We need a free press. Now, of course, that means that a free, unregulated press will bring up charlatans and crazy people and conspiracy theorists, and some of those people will have audiences as well. But it will also bring to the fore people who are honest, truthful, and those will tend, by reputation, to have a good audience. And I think that despite the dangers of the toxic versions of the press, as a Candace Owens or a Tucker Carlson represent, you get other folks out there like the Euron Brooks that are telling you the news as it is, or people like us who can say it like it is from our perspective, who won't bend to ideological whims or to a tribe we happen to have an affinity for, but only to the truth. And that's what you need, folks, to make proper decisions, is the truth, and you need lots of information to do that, and you don't want any restraints on that information. That's my capitalist thought for the day.
That was great. And you mentioned Yaron Brook, and someone suggested to me the other day that I should go on his show. And given that he's a buddy of yours, maybe you could pull some strings, get me over there. It's just a suggestion.
I'll give him a text.
Great capitalist thought for the day, and we'll see everybody tomorrow.
Take care, folks. Hey, and always remember to check your premises. Peace.